The neon heartbeat of New York City usually promised pleasure, entertainment, and the kind of electric anonymity that only a metropolis could provide. It was 1941, and Times Square was the center of the universe. Even at 2 o'clock in the morning, the Great White Way was dazzlingly bright, a canyon of artificial daylight carved out of the night. The theaters had emptied hours ago, but the streets were still alive with the restless energy of insomniacs, late-night revelers, sailors on leave, and the dreamers who believed the city never actually slept. But on this particular Tuesday morning, the rhythm of the city was about to skip a beat. The traffic on Broadway was thinning out when a black Packard sedan, sleek and menacing like a shark in dark water, tore around the corner of 42nd Street. It didn't have license plates. Its windows were tinted so dark they looked like voids in reality. It didn't slow down for the traffic lights. It moved with a singular, aggressive purpose that made cab drivers slam on their brakes and pedestrians scramble for the safety of the curb. The car screeched to a halt right in the center of the square, directly beneath the massive glowing advertisements. For a moment, it just sat there, idling, its engine growling low and deep. The few dozen people nearby stopped walking. They watched, holding their breath, expecting a shootout. In those days, a car like that usually meant machine guns were about to sing. But there were no gunshots. Instead, the rear door of the Packard swung open. A heavy object was shoved out from the back seat, kicked out onto the cold, unforgiving pavement with violent force. The door slammed shut, tires squealed, and the car vanished into the urban labyrinth as quickly as it had arrived, leaving behind nothing but a cloud of exhaust smoke and a heap of humanity on the sidewalk. The crowd hesitated. Was it a body? Was it a drunk? Slowly, the shape on the ground began to move. It groaned, a sound of utter despair that cut through the city noise. As the man pushed himself up onto his hands and knees, a collective gasp rippled through the onlookers. The man was stark naked. He was stripped of everything, his clothes, his dignity, his defenses. He was a large man, pale and shivering in the night air, covered in bruises that spoke of a very recent, very precise physical education. But it wasn't his nakedness that made the women turn away and the men stare in shock. It was the sign. Hanging around his thick neck, suspended by a rough piece of twine, was a large piece of cardboard. On it, painted in bright, dripping red letters that looked disturbingly like fresh blood, was a confession. It was simple, brutal, and visible to everyone under the megawatt brilliance of the Times Square lights. I am a coward who hits little girls. As the man lifted his face to the light, trying desperately to cover himself with hands that shook uncontrollably, a beat cop on the corner recognized him. The officer dropped his nightstick. His jaw went slack. "Sweet Mother of God!" the officer whispered, his voice trembling. "That's Captain O'Malley!" It was impossible, yet there he was, Captain Patrick O'Malley, the bull of the Bronx, the man who ran the toughest precinct in the city with an iron fist, the man who terrorized Harlem, who took bribes with one hand and cracked skulls with the other, a man who walked the streets like a god, untouchable and feared. But now he was huddled on the concrete, weeping like a broken child, exposed to the ridicule of the very people he used to torment. Flashbulbs from opportunist street photographers began to pop, capturing the image that would end a career and start a legend. The question on everyone's lips that night wasn't just what had happened, but who. Who on earth possessed the power, the audacity, and the sheer terrifying reach to strip a police captain naked and dump him in the center of the world? Who could touch the untouchable? The answer lay miles uptown, in the shadowed heart of Harlem, where a man named Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson sat in a leather armchair, swirling a glass of cognac, watching his daughter sleep. He had just taught the city a lesson in physics. For every action, there is an unequal and opposite reaction. This is the story of that reaction. To understand the end, we must go back 12 hours to the beginning. It was a Tuesday afternoon, bathed in the kind of warm golden sunlight that made the brownstones of Harlem glow. The streets were a symphony of life, jazz spilling out of open windows, children playing stickball, vendors shouting their wares. In this vibrant world walked 10-year-old Elisha Johnson. Elisha was royalty, though she didn't fully understand what that meant yet. She knew her father, Bumpy, was important. She knew people tipped their hats when he walked by. She knew they always had the best table at the restaurant. But Bumpy had worked tirelessly to build a fortress around his daughter's innocence. To her, he wasn't the godfather of Harlem. He was just Daddy, the man who read her stories and checked under her bed for monsters. She was walking home from school, lost in her own world, carefully licking a vanilla ice cream cone. She was humming a tune she'd heard on the radio, skipping over the cracks in the sidewalk. She didn't see the policeman until it was too late. Captain Patrick O'Malley was patrolling the neighborhood, not because he had to, but because he enjoyed it. He liked the fear he inspired. He liked reminding the residents of Harlem that they lived under his boot. He was a man consumed by a toxic cocktail of racism and authority. To him, the badge on his chest wasn't a symbol of service, it was a license to hate. As Elisha rounded the corner, she collided with O'Malley's leg. It was a minor accident, the kind that happens 1,000 times a day in a crowded city. A bit of vanilla ice cream smeared onto the captain's pristine, pressed navy blue trousers. Elisha gasped and jumped back, her eyes wide with instant terror. She dropped her cone. "I'm sorry," she squeaked, her voice trembling. "I'm so sorry, sir. I didn't see you." Any decent man would have sighed, brushed it off, and perhaps told the child to watch where she was going. But Patrick O'Malley was not a decent man. He looked down at the stain on his trousers, and his face turned a violent shade of crimson. He looked at the child, and he didn't see a 10-year-old girl. He saw a target. He saw a demographic he despised. "You clumsy little brat," O'Malley hissed, his voice dripping with venom. Passers-by stopped. The music on the street seemed to fade. Everyone knew O'Malley. Everyone knew his temper. I can pay for the cleaning," stammered Elisha, tears welling up in her large, dark eyes. "My daddy will pay for it, I promise." "Your daddy?" O'Malley scoffed, stepping closer, towering over her like a skyscraper of malice. "And who is your daddy? Some shoeshine boy? Some drunk?" Elisha drew herself up, trying to find a shred of courage. "My daddy is Ellsworth Johnson." The name hung in the air like a thunderclap. For a split second, O'Malley froze. The name Bumpy Johnson commanded respect, even among the police, especially among the police. Bumpy had politicians in his pocket and judges on his payroll. Logic dictated that O'Malley should walk away. Survival instinct screamed at him to let it go. But pride is a dangerous thing. O'Malley looked around. He saw the people of Harlem watching him. He saw the judgment in their eyes. If he backed down now before a little girl, he would look weak. His racism, combined with his fragile ego, pushed him past the point of no return. "I don't care who your father is," O'Malley spat. "In this street, I am the king. I am the law." And then he did the unthinkable. He pulled back his heavy hand and swang. The sound of the slap was sickeningly loud, a sharp crack that echoed off the brick buildings. It wasn't a playful tap. It was a full-force strike from a grown man. Elisha was knocked off her feet. She hit the pavement hard, her cheek instantly flaming red, her lip split and bleeding. She lay there for a moment, too shocked to cry, staring up at the giant in blue. O'Malley wiped his hand on his jacket, looking down at her with sneering contempt. He spat on the ground next to her head. "Go tell your daddy that. Tell him Captain O'Malley sends his regards." He turned and walked away, his head held high, adjusting his belt, feeling powerful. He didn't notice the silence that had fallen over the street.
It was a heavy, suffocating silence, the kind of low pressure that precedes a tornado.
"Bumpy," Gordon said, his breath coming in short gasps. "We need to go. Now." Bumpy didn't move. His voice came muffled from under the hot towel. "I'm in the middle of a shave, Gordon. It can wait." "It can't wait," Gordon said, his voice cracking. "It's Elisha." In an instant, Bumpy sat up. The towel fell from his face. The relaxation was gone, replaced by an intensity that made the air in the room drop 10 degrees. He didn't shout. He didn't ask a dozen questions. He just looked at Gordon with eyes that were suddenly very old and very cold. "Tell me," Bumpy said. "Captain O'Malley," Gordon explained, the words tumbling out. "On Lenox Avenue. He slapped her, Bumpy, knocked her down, split her lip because of an ice cream cone." The barber stopped sharpening his razor. The other customers put down their newspapers. The entire shop held its breath, waiting for the explosion. They expected Bumpy to rage. They expected him to overturn the chair, to scream, to order a massacre. But Bumpy Johnson did none of those things. He stood up slowly. He unbuttoned the barber's cape and let it slide to the floor. He walked to the mirror and adjusted his tie. He smoothed his jacket. His movements were precise, mechanical, and terrifyingly calm. "Where is she?" Bumpy asked. "Home, with her mother. She's terrified, Bumpy. She's asking for you." Bumpy nodded. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a wad of cash, and placed it on the counter for the barber. "Sorry for the interruption," he said softly. He walked toward the door. Gordon followed him, his hand instinctively going to the gun under his jacket. "I'll round up the boys," Gordon said, his voice low and eager. "We'll find O'Malley. We'll put so many holes in him he'll look like a sponge. We'll burn his precinct to the ground." Bumpy stopped at the door. He turned to Gordon. The look on his face wasn't anger. It was something far worse. It was judgment. "No guns," Bumpy said. Blink, confused. "No guns, Bumpy? He hit your daughter. He's a captain. We have to send a message." "A bullet is too fast," Bumpy replied, his voice devoid of emotion. "If we kill him, he becomes a hero. The city will bury him with honors. They'll name a street after him. He doesn't deserve a hero's death." Bumpy opened the door and stepped out into the Harlem afternoon. "War is for soldiers, Gordon. This isn't a war. This is an education. And when you train a dog that bites, you don't shoot it. You break its spirit." "I don't want his life," Bumpy whispered, staring down the street toward the police station. "I want his dignity. I want his soul." Night fell over New York City. Captain O'Malley was feeling good. He had spent the evening retelling the story of the afternoon to his sycophants, embellishing the details, laughing at how the little brat had cried. He felt invincible. He was the king of the street. By 10 p.m., he was at his favorite watering hole, a speakeasy in Hell's Kitchen that paid him protection money. It was outside his jurisdiction, which made him feel even safer. He was off duty, wearing a civilian suit, drinking expensive whiskey on the house. He was loud, he was obnoxious, he was drunk on power and alcohol. "They know who runs this town," O'Malley boasted to a waitress who was trying to ignore him. "I put them in their place. You gotta show them the back of your hand sometimes, or they forget." Around 11:30 p.m., O'Malley stumbled up from his table. "Nature calls," he slurred, weaving his way toward the restroom in the back of the club. He pushed open the door to the men's room, humming a tune. He expected to be alone. He wasn't. The restroom was small, dimly lit, and smelled of disinfectant. Standing there, leaning against the sinks, were 3 men. They were massive, they were silent, and they were blocking the exit. O'Malley blinked, his drunk brain trying to process the threat. "This represents occupied territory, boys," he laughed, swaying slightly. "Find another tree to water."
The man in the center stepped forward. It was Big Sam, a man whose fists were the size of hams. He didn't smile.
"Captain," Sam said, his voice like grinding gravel, "you have an appointment." O'Malley's hand went instinctively to his hip, reaching for the service revolver he kept there, but his reflexes were dulled by the whiskey. Before his fingers could even graze the leather of his holster, Sam moved with frightening speed. A fist slammed into O'Malley's solar plexus. The air rushed out of the captain's lungs with a sickening whoosh. He doubled over, gasping, his eyes bulging. Before he could hit the floor, a second blow struck him behind the ear. The lights went out for Captain O'Malley. They didn't drag him out the front door. That would be amateur. They carried him out the back service entrance, flanked by two men holding him up as if he were just another drunk friend who had had too much to drink. The bouncer held the door for them. No one saw a kidnapping. They just saw a night out in New York ending the way it usually did. They tossed him into the trunk of the black Packard. The lid slammed shut, sealing him in darkness. The car roared away, heading uptown, carrying the law enforcement of New York City like a bag of groceries. O'Malley woke up to the sensation of ice-cold water hitting his face. He gasped, choking, flailing his head. He tried to move his hands, but he couldn't. He was bound tightly to a wooden chair. He opened his eyes, blinking against the sting of the water. He wasn't in the speakeasy anymore. He was in a warehouse, a slaughterhouse by the smell of it. Old iron, rust, and dried blood. A single bare light bulb swung above his head, casting long, swaying shadows that danced on the brick walls. "Wake up, Captain." The voice came from the darkness beyond the light. O'Malley squinted, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Who's there?" O'Malley shouted, trying to summon his command voice, but it came out as a squeak. "Do you know who I am? I'm a police captain. Every cop in the city will be looking for me. I'll have you all fried in the electric chair." A figure stepped into the circle of light. It was Bumpy Johnson. He looked immaculate. His suit was pressed, his shoes shined, his cufflinks glinting under the bulb. He held a book in one hand. He looked like a professor about to give a lecture, not a gangster holding a cop hostage. Bumpy pulled up a crate and sat down, crossing his legs casually. He looked at O'Malley with a mixture of curiosity and disgust, as if observing a fascinatingly ugly insect. "No one is looking for you, Captain," Bumpy said softly. "Your daughter's name is Alicia. She likes mathematics. She plays the piano. She sleeps with a nightlight because she's afraid of the dark."
Bumpy's voice dropped to a whisper, but it carried more weight than a scream. "You touched her face. You put your hands on my child. Why? Did it make you feel big, Captain? Did hitting a 10-year-old girl make you feel like a man?" O'Malley was sweating now, the alcohol sweating out of his pores. "It was a mistake. She ran into me. I didn't know who she was." "Liar," Bumpy said. "You knew. And even if you didn't, you hit a child. That tells me everything I need to know about your soul." Bumpy reached into his jacket pocket. O'Malley flinched. Bumpy pulled out a straight razor. He unfolded it slowly, the silver steel catching the light. O'Malley began to whimper. No, please. I have money. I can protect your operations. I can make tickets disappear. Please, Johnson, don't cut me." Bumpy looked at the razor, then at O'Malley. He smiled, a cold, mirthless smile. "Cut you?" Bumpy asked. "No, that's too easy. Physical pain fades, Captain. Scars heal. If I kill you, your family gets a pension. Your picture goes up on the wall." Bumpy stood up and snapped the razor shut. "I don't want your blood. I want your life. I want to take the one thing you value more than anything else, your authority, your fear, your reputation." Bumpy turned to the shadows. Strip him." 3 men stepped forward. They held shears and a bucket of red paint. "Please," O'Malley screamed, thrashing in the chair. "Just kill me! Do it! Don't do this!" "You had your chance to be a man," Bumpy said, turning his back on the screaming captain. "Now you're going to be a lesson." And that brings us back to Times Square. The black Packard sped away, leaving O'Malley standing there in the cold, harsh light of 2 a.m. He was naked. His hair had been hacked off in jagged, humiliating clumps. He was covered in bruises, but not a drop of blood had been spilled. And there was the sign, "I am a coward who hits little girls." The flashbulbs popped like gunfire. Pop, pop, pop. O'Malley tried to cover his face, tried to cover his body, but there was nowhere to hide. He was surrounded by the people of the city, the theater goers, the taxi drivers, the hot dog vendors, and they weren't looking at him with fear anymore. They were laughing. They were pointing. The monster had been turned into a joke. A patrol car pulled up, sirens wailing. 2 officers jumped out, rushing to cover their captain with a blanket. But as they grabbed him, O'Malley looked into the eyes of his subordinates. He saw it there, the pity, the disgust, the loss of respect. He knew in that moment that his life was over. He could never wear the uniform again. He could never bark an order again. He could never walk down a street in Harlem and expect people to tremble. He was finished. The next morning, the photo was on the front page of every tabloid in New York. The police commissioner, facing a public relations nightmare and the undeniable evidence of O'Malley's assault on a child, suspended him immediately. An internal investigation was launched. Within 48 hours, Captain Patrick O'Malley resigned in disgrace and fled the city, moving to a small town in Ohio where nobody knew his name. The morning after the incident, Harlem was quiet. Bumpy Johnson sat on his front porch drinking coffee. Alicia came out of the house holding her doll. The bruise on her cheek was turning purple, but she was smiling. "Daddy?" she asked. Bumpy put down his coffee and pulled her onto his lap. "Yes, Princess? Is the bad man gone?" Bumpy looked out over the street. He saw his neighbors walking by. He saw the respect in their eyes, not just the fear of a gangster, but the respect for a father who protected his own. "Yes, baby," Bumpy said softly, kissing the top of her head. "The bad man is gone. He won't ever hurt anyone again." Bumpy Johnson was a criminal. He was a killer. He was a gangster. But on that day, to the people of Harlem, he was something else. He was the only law that mattered. He proved that you don't need a bullet to destroy a man. Sometimes all you need is a mirror, a sign, and the bright lights of Broadway. He proved that you can strike a king and you might live, but if you touch the princess, the kingdom will fall on your head. The story of Captain O'Malley became a legend in the underworld. It changed the rules of the game. It reminded everyone, friend and foe, cop and criminal, that there were lines you did not cross. If this story of brutal, poetic justice gave you chills, hit that like button. If you think O'Malley got exactly what he deserved, type justice in the comments below. And make sure you subscribe because we are just getting started. In our next video, we're going inside the walls of Alcatraz. We're going to tell you the story of how Bumpy Johnson survived the most dangerous prison on Earth and how he tracked down the rat who put him there. Turn on notifications. You don't want to miss what happens next. Remember, respect is earned, but justice is taken. See you in the next one.